At this point, complete panic set in. Total chaos came into the system. Now, remember I told you that banks were holding these derivatives as part of their capital. Yes. When you go to a bank, you fondly think there's money in the vault. You even might fondly think there's gold bars in the vault. But no, they had these derivatives in the vault. These derivatives were worthless. If you had gone to the teller window and said, I want my money, the teller might have said, well, I'm sorry, sir, madam, we don't have money for you. Would you like these stupid derivatives? Can you see a bit of a problem there? It was a huge problem. It all happened because of what became called the shadow banking system. I'm going to read to you from an article in the Financial Times, the pink one, written by their senior editor Julian Tett. The shadow banking world's implosion is the real culprit in this context of the almost collapse of the world's economic system. Now at this point you're saying, oh my God, Greg, what's a shadow banking system? The ordinary banking system is scary enough. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the shadow banking system. These mortgages were getting cranked out by banks. They were getting cranked out by mortgage companies. A mortgage company is not a bank, quote unquote. There was almost no regulation on these mortgage companies. There was almost no regulation on Wall Street. There was almost no regulation on AIG cranking out these credit default swaps. There was almost no regulation on these AAA rating people. I'm telling you that the world's economic system almost came to a collapse because of the shadow banking system. Now, I've given you quite a lot of information there. Shall we now pause and take some breath and have some questions?
Okay, Ray, I have a question. I've been a professor at Cal State University Northridge in business and economics. About 3 years ago, after doing some reading and some of my own work, I realized that there appeared to be a real problem with the banking system in the United States. My question is this: why weren't more of the so-called experts appear to be aware of this? If you heard the media, if you watched the media, it didn't appear that there was a lot being said about this, and it appeared that a lot less was even being done by the Bush administration. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Excellent question. The problem, Rick, is not that there weren't enough people, there weren't enough Cassandras pointing to the problem. The problem is that there were so many and no one listened to them. There's a whole stack of people. Brooksley Born was the economics advisor to Clinton. She said the unrestricted trading of derivatives will threaten our economy. Ignored. Sheila Bair, ignored. Sheila Bair of the FDIC, ignored. These two ladies were very recently given the JFK Award for Courage for speaking out, but no one listened to them. Rick, the list goes on. Larry Lindsey, the economics advisor to George Bush, said we need to regulate mortgages. Warren Buffett called them instruments of mass financial destruction. Meredith Whitney, a banking analyst, foretold unprecedented losses in the banking industry. A whole parade of economists, Paul Krugman, Joseph Stiglitz, Nouriel Roubini, to name only three, two of whom won the Nobel Prize for Economics. The problem was not that there weren't enough people, the problem is no one listened to them. They didn't come together and cause a critical mass. There were scattered points of light that didn't coalesce into a nuclear explosion. And don't forget, while all this was going on, there was a presidential election. The media were concerned with lipstick on pigs, not macroeconomic theory.
Ray, can you explain a little bit about the credit default swap and why having insurance policies, quote-unquote insurance policies, on collateralized debt obligations, IOUs on huge piles of mortgages that no one quite understood what was in them, why having major insurance policies was such a bad idea on these things?
Well, it wasn't such a bad idea in and of itself. Excellent question. If the credit default swaps had been spread throughout the insurance industry, if there'd been diversification, that wouldn't have been a problem. But in practice, one company, AIG, wrote about 80 to 85% of all of these credit default swaps, these insurance policies. Now, the reason you had these things was to reassure the investors. Look, Wall Street has been able to get the AAA people to sign off on them. It's got the world's largest insurance company, for heaven's sake, to sign off on them. These two heavy hitters have given it their blessing. These two heavy hitters have sprinkled holy water on this whole setup. The Pope has sprinkled holy water on it. I'm not endorsing any religion. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the Chief Rabbi, name it who you will. These top theologians have sprinkled holy water on this setup.
Ray, Bill Riley and others have blamed the Community Reinvestment Act on all these problems. Can you comment on that?
This is pure bunkum. Republicans are good at this game. There's a very tiny peripheral involvement. To refresh your memory, the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, was passed in 1977. The economy didn't come tumbling down in 1978, I would point out. Next, I would point out it was amended in 1995. The global economy didn't come crashing to a halt in 1996. And most of all, the CRA did not apply to mortgage companies. It applied to banks as legally defined. The Countrywides, the AmeriQuests, the subsidiary companies of the banks that were mortgage companies were not regulated by the CRA.
And just to be clear, that's where the banks themselves, the vast majority of the subprime, the mortgages that ended up failing, 97% were made by mortgage companies and not banks defined by the CRA. Is that correct?
This is entirely correct.
Yeah.
Yes. It got to the point where this shadow banking system totally elbowed out the typical, the Main Street banking system.
Okay. So let's move to the causes. How did we get here, and why was this stable system of the 60s replaced by this hugely unstable system of the 90s and the aughts?
In a word, for profit. Mm-hmm. At one point, 40% of America's corporate profits were made by Wall Street. That's where all these fabulous bonuses got paid. I'm telling you that America's predominant sector in the economy wasn't manufacturing things, making Boeings, making jet engines. It was shuffling paper. David, your question is excellent because George Bush asked this same question in a conference room in the White House in September 2008. He said, "How did we get here?" And they told him it's because you didn't listen to your economics advisor, Larry Lindsey, a couple of years ago. We got into this mess, in short, because of a radical ideology going back to Ronald Reagan that was taken to an absurd extreme. The view was advanced, look, if we can only abolish government, get government off our backs, slash the red tape, let free markets do their work, we'll all be richer and better off. And everyone thought, yay, way to go. A series of laws